Every thought you've ever had leaves a trace, not in your brain, but in the underlying code that your reality runs on. Nobody told you that your mind isn't just interpreting existence, it's writing directly into the matrix beneath it. That's why some moments feel scripted before they happen. You're not imagining it. You're reading the imprint of your own signal before it becomes physical. When he exposed this, they didn't fear his philosophy. They feared his precision. Because he revealed something ancient cultures hinted at but never decoded fully. The mind doesn't communicate with reality using emotion or intention first. It communicates using pattern, a sequence, a command string, and every human carries one, even if most never learn to read it. I realized it the first time I watched someone break down during a moment of intense shame. The air around them shifted, not metaphorically, literally, like a corrupted line of code rippling through the room. Their internal script had crashed, but instead of being random, their collapse followed a predictable structure: overload, fragmentation, echo, imprint, 4 steps. The same structure I've seen in elite performers, mystics, and people at the edge of breakdowns. The pattern never changes, only the intensity does. Your mind fires electrical sequences that the larger matrix treats as executable instructions. Every fear becomes a loop. Every obsession becomes a repeating function. Every breakthrough becomes a new operating command. And the wild part? You can intercept, rewrite, or even delete these sequences before they manifest into events you'll mistake as fate. But here's the part that shook me the most. The Matrix never resists. It mirrors. And once you see how that mirroring works, you never mistake your life for chance again. Your mind doesn't send thoughts into the divine matrix. It sends syntax. That's the hidden mechanism he uncovered. A silent stream of patterned electrical activity that behaves less like emotion and more like a command line. And the matrix responds not to how you feel, but to the order of the signals you fire. A person can be terrified, but if their internal sequence is coherent, reality bends around them with shocking obedience. Meanwhile, someone calm but fragmented keeps triggering glitches that look like bad luck. Every time you think you're reacting, you're actually broadcasting a coded structure, and that structure decides what the matrix mirrors back. Most people never notice the structure because they confuse content with command. They think, "I'm worried about money," is a feeling, but what the field receives is a 3-step instruction. Anticipate loss, tighten options, restrict flow. The code matters more than the story wrapped around it. This is why your life loops feel so eerily consistent. The matrix doesn't generate new problems, it simply executes whatever sequence you've repeated the longest. When I first understood this, I did something simple but radical. I mapped the pattern I entered whenever someone challenged me in public. My muscles would tense, my breath would shorten, my mind would split into prediction and defense. And without realizing it, I issued a 4-layer command to the matrix: threat detected, collapse boundary, expect attack, amplify tension. The moment I saw the pattern, everything became obvious. It wasn't the people that triggered me. It was my own script firing faster than my awareness. The ancient texts he studied weren't mystical instructions. They were syntax manuals disguised as metaphors. Breathwork wasn't about calm. It was a method to reorganize your internal command sequence. Chanting wasn't about devotion. It was rhythmic code alignment. Prayer wasn't begging. It was patterning. And here's the part that should stop you cold. If the matrix mirrors the order of your internal signals, then the person who learns to alter the sequence, not the emotion, not the intention, becomes impossible to predict and impossible to control. And that's exactly the secret they tried to bury. They told you that mindset shapes reality, but that's the biggest myth in this entire field. Mindset is just decoration. What actually shapes your life is the sequence you run beneath the mindset. The ancient code he exposed and everyone tried to dismiss because it makes human power measurable instead of mystical. The myth says, think positive. The mechanic says, if the underlying command string is corrupted, positivity just adds a prettier mask to the same executable loop. That's why people swear nothing ever changes for them, even after journaling, visualizing, meditating, or repeating affirmations. They're changing the narrative, not the syntax. I saw this play out in someone who thought they were manifesting confidence before a difficult conversation. They repeated strong phrases, stood tall, even rehearsed powerful scenarios. But underneath all of it, their real code was firing in a completely different sequence. Predict rejection, prepare escape, shrink identity. They walked into the room with their shoulders high and their signal collapsed. The conversation went exactly the way their subconscious pattern instructed. It wasn't sabotage, it was execution. This is the part people hate hearing, but it's the only thing that frees them. Your conscious intention means nothing until the hidden sequence underneath it is rewritten. To make this real, let me give you a scenario, something subtle, something you've lived. Imagine you're alone after an argument. The room feels heavy, but the weight isn't emotional, it's structural. Your mind begins running the oldest loop you carry, scanning what you said, predicting the worst interpretation, rewriting the memory, tightening your chest. Each step fires in the same order every time. Watch carefully, and you'll see the exact pattern. Replay, self-blame, collapse, withdrawal. You think you're thinking about what happened. You're not. You're running a preloaded script, and the matrix is already aligning to mirror the command it receives. This is why ancient schools insisted on observing the mind instead of arguing with it. They understood that the first lie humans believe is that thoughts are spontaneous. They're not. They're structured output. And if you don't catch the structure catches you. And if this loop remains invisible, it becomes something far stranger. It becomes fate. Your nervous system is the stabilizer of the code, the part nobody ever connects to the divine matrix because it feels too biological, too ordinary. But here's the quiet truth he uncovered. Your signal only becomes coherent when your nervous system stops jittering like a broken transmitter. You can have the cleanest intention, the sharpest focus, even the clearest command sequence. But if your internal regulator is firing unevenly, the matrix receives a scrambled pattern. And scrambled patterns create distorted reflections, delays, misfires, contradictions, results that almost manifest and then collapse right before reaching you. Calm isn't relaxation. Calm is signal precision. When your breath slows, your heart rate settles, and your muscles release microtension, you're not becoming peaceful. You're aligning the electrical clock that your reality uses to sync with your internal code. Every stable creator I've ever met had the same signature: steady pulse, slow inhale, grounded posture. Not because it's spiritual, because it's mathematically clean. A jittery nervous system emits conflicting instructions. Part of you signals forward movement, another part signals danger, another part signals withdrawal. The matrix mirrors all three, and your life becomes a stalled, tangled sequence. There's a reason ancient lineages placed breathwork before any form of manifestation or intention. Breath regulates the electrical rhythm that determines whether your commands arrive intact. To feel the mechanic directly, try this 30-45-second practice he used every morning before issuing any mental command. Inhale slowly through your nose for 4 seconds, pause for 2, exhale for 6, pause for 1. But don't focus on the breathing itself. Focus on the feeling of the exhale smoothing the signal in your body. You'll feel a subtle drop like static dissolving. That drop is coherence forming. When you hit that state, thoughts stop being noisy. They become organized. Patterns you didn't notice arrange themselves into lines, like someone straightening scattered documents. And in that clarity, the command string you send to the matrix becomes unmistakable. You're no longer negotiating with your mind. You're broadcasting with clean architecture. This is why arguments, deadlines, and fear-based situations throw people off so brutally. The nervous system spikes, coherence fractures, and suddenly the matrix starts executing emergency code instead of deliberate command. The person thinks their fate changed. It didn't. Their signal stability collapsed. Because the moment your nervous system steadies, reality stops guessing and starts responding. Emotion isn't noise inside the system. It's voltage. That's the piece everyone missed, and the piece he revealed so clearly they tried to shut him down. Emotion is not meant to be suppressed, analyzed, or moralized. It is meant to be routed. A fear spike is raw charge. Anger is accelerated current. Grief is a deep, recoding pulse that forces the system to rewrite corrupted lines. Every feeling you reject doesn't disappear. It becomes a rogue electrical surge running unauthorized scripts in your field. And every feeling you learn to channel becomes a precision amplifier for the command sequence you're issuing. Most people think vulnerability weakens their signal, but the mechanic is the opposite. Vulnerability exposes the true voltage underneath the narrative. When you stop pretending you're fine, the system stops having to waste energy masking the distortion. Suddenly, the command becomes visible, usable, charged. Emotion as fuel isn't philosophical, it's structural. It's the difference between typing code on a dead battery and typing with a live current running through the board. I learned this during a moment I didn't expect. Someone confronted me with something I'd been avoiding, a truth I didn't want to look at. My chest tightened. My stomach dropped. I felt the exact old sequence preparing to run, defend, justify, shut down, detach. But instead of collapsing into it, I redirected the emotional spike into the command. Not by thinking positive, by allowing the voltage to surge through my awareness without letting it hijack the pattern. The code I held in my mind stayed steady, stay present, read input, respond cleanly, and something wild happened. The fear didn't weaken the sequence. It powered it. The matrix mirrored clarity, not collapse. Emotion becomes weapon or fuel depending on whether you embed it inside the command or let it override the command entirely. Anger channeled into a stable pattern becomes boundary power. Fear routed through a coherent sequence becomes anticipation and precision. Grief held inside a clean line becomes reorganization, a total clearing of corrupted architecture. The voltage obeys whatever pattern you're running. And here's the part people rarely experience, but once you do, you never forget it. When you direct emotional charge into your chosen command, the entire matrix shifts like a system recognizing a high authority override key. They never warn you about the most dangerous part of the divine matrix. It can be hijacked before you notice, not by dark forces or entities, by unconscious code injections from other people's signals. Every conversation, every room, every digital interaction carries embedded patterns, and if your internal sequence is even slightly unstable, those external patterns slip into your system like unauthorized lines, rewriting your script without permission. That's why you can wake up clear and focused, and by noon feel like your entire reality has shifted sideways. A hijack doesn't feel dramatic. It feels familiar. It feels like you suddenly changed your mind, when in reality the shift wasn't yours. Someone else's unresolved loop synced with your field and began running inside your architecture. Their fear becomes your hesitation. Their urgency becomes your pressure. Their doubt becomes your stalled momentum. The matrix isn't punishing you. It's responding to whatever code is currently dominant in your body. And if you don't notice the hijack as it happens, the pattern starts executing as if it were yours all along. Let me show you with something common and deceptively small. The moment after a tense message arrives on your phone. You read it, and instantly your chest contracts, your breath shortens, and your mind begins calculating possible threats. But none of this originated from you. The message carried someone else's chaotic sequence: panic, projection, demand for control. When you opened it, that sequence fired into your system and began reproducing. You think you're responding emotionally, but actually you're running their code. This is the most widespread hijack on the planet. Reclaiming command isn't done by resisting the influence. Resistance still reacts to the foreign script. The reversal happens when you reassert your original sequence with enough clarity that the matrix recognizes the override. The moment you feel the hijack, that micro-freeze, that subtle contraction, pause for one breath and bring your awareness to the exact center of your chest. Not to calm yourself, but to locate the command line. Then silently issue a clean internal pattern. Identify, isolate, restore. You'll feel the foreign code detach like static being pulled from your signal. Because once you reestablish your own sequence, the matrix stops listening to the intrusion and locks back onto you. Your system doesn't change through insight alone. It changes through repatterning, and repatterning requires tools that speak the same language the matrix listens to: sequence, rhythm, and charge. He called it the reprogramming toolkit, not because it was fancy, but because it worked on the actual architecture instead of the story wrapped around it. These methods don't soothe you. They rewrite the executable core of your signal so reality receives a different instruction the moment you shift. The first tool is the breath code sync. Most people breathe randomly, letting emotion yank their lungs around. But when you breathe in a deliberate ratio, you're not trying to relax. You're forcing your neural rhythm to match the pattern you choose. Try this simple structure. Inhale for 4, pause for 1, exhale for 4, pause for 1. Keep the count steady. After about 20 seconds, something subtle happens. The mind begins aligning with the rhythm, and the old loop loses its authority. You literally overwrite the internal clock the matrix uses to mirror your sequence. The second tool is the charge reset. This one is fast and looks almost too easy, but it works because it interrupts the emotional voltage before it attaches to an unwanted pattern. When you feel a surge, frustration, anxiety, shame, don't label it. Don't analyze it. Bring all your awareness to the sensation for 3 seconds without flinching. Then draw one slow breath, letting the exhale drop through your chest. That drop clears the voltage from the corrupted loop and releases it into neutral charge. Now you can reroute it into the pattern you actually want to fire. The third tool is Focus Redirect. Attention isn't about thinking differently. It's the cursor that selects which internal command the matrix executes next. If your focus stays on the problem, you're reinforcing the problem's syntax. To redirect, choose one specific sensory anchor. The sound of your breath, the weight of your hands, the feeling of your feet grounded. Hold it for 5 seconds. That micro-anchor breaks the loop and opens a clean line so you can insert a new instruction. And the fourth tool is the field seal. Not a shield, a seal. Imagine your awareness drawing a thin boundary 1 inch around your entire body, not to block others, but to define where your command line ends and the world begins. This stabilizes your signal so external code can't slip in unnoticed. Have you ever felt your whole mood shift the instant you walked into a room? Tell me your most vivid moment like this in the comments. The moment you start rewriting your internal code, the system pushes back, not because it's conscious, but because old patterns fight to stay dominant. These obstacles aren't emotional, they're architectural. They show up as leaks, reversals, and split signals, and unless you understand the mechanic behind each one, you'll mistake them for personal flaws instead of structural interference. A leak happens when your command sequence fires cleanly, but loses charge before it reaches execution. You'll know it by that familiar feeling of starting with clarity and ending in fog. The cause is simple. Part of your attention is still tied to an unresolved loop in the background. It might be a worry, a memory, a subtle insecurity, but the real issue is that a portion of your available voltage is being siphoned into an old script. A leak isn't solved by pushing harder. You solve it by identifying the open thread and closing it consciously. One sentence is enough. That loop is paused. The moment you mark it, the siphon stops. Reversals are rarer but more dangerous. A reversal happens when your system interprets your command as the opposite of what you intended. It's why people who desperately want connection behave in ways that push connection away, or why someone who wants progress suddenly sabotages the opportunity they've been waiting for. A reversal occurs when the emotional voltage attached to the command is wired to an older, contradictory script. You're issuing 2 instructions at once, one conscious, one buried. The fix isn't to force positivity, it's to identify the contradiction. When you name the hidden pattern, the matrix stops treating it as the dominant line. Split signals are the most common trap of all. This is when 2 parts of you fire different sequences simultaneously, one pushing forward, one pulling back. The matrix mirrors both, resulting in outcomes that almost work, then fall apart. You feel it as hesitation, half steps, plans that never fully materialize. A split signal is resolved by choosing a single, coherent command, not the perfect one, just the true one. The body relaxes the moment you commit. These obstacles aren't failures, they're checkpoints in the architecture. And once you see the structure behind each trap, you stop getting caught inside them and start moving through them like someone who finally understands the system instead of wrestling blindly with it. Integration doesn't happen in meditation or in theory or in the quiet moments when everything feels aligned. Integration happens in motion, in the exact moments when life presses against you and your old code tries to reassert itself. That's where the real architecture reveals whether it's been rewritten or if the old pattern still holds root access. And the shift is never dramatic. It shows up in micro choices: the breath you take before responding, the tone you choose when challenged, the decision you make when pressure climbs and clarity feels thin. When you begin operating from coherence instead of impulse, the matrix starts responding faster, not because you're suddenly lucky, but because your signal stops contradicting itself. You walk into a situation that used to trigger collapse, and instead of tightening, your awareness widens. You notice details you used to miss: the pacing of someone's voice, the tension in your own hands, the small instinct that tells you exactly what's happening beneath the surface. That instinct isn't intuition, it's synchronized code recognition. Your system is finally reading the room without distortion. Take something simple. You're about to make a difficult decision that used to paralyze you. In the past, the loop would fire instantly, predict wrong outcome, brace, freeze, delay. But now your nervous system stays steady. The voltage that once spiked into fear now routes cleanly through your chosen sequence. You feel the old pattern trying to hijack the moment, but instead of collapsing, you issue your internal command: observe, align, act. And you act Not from panic, not from impulsivity, but from a clarity that feels almost unnervingly calm. That calm is the new architecture taking over. What surprises people most during integration is how reality begins rearranging itself around their coherence. Interactions smooth out. Opportunities appear that were invisible before. Problems dissolve before escalating. It feels like life is cooperating with you. But what's actually happening is simpler. The matrix is mirroring the first stable signal you've ever consistently sent. And in that moment, when you feel your world shifting in response to your internal order, you realize something that changes everything. You're no longer reacting to reality. Reality is reacting to you. When your internal code stabilizes, it doesn't just change how you feel. It changes the domains of power that shape your entire life. Money stops behaving like a chaotic force and starts behaving like a system that responds to clarity. Relationships stop looping through the same emotional patterns. Purpose stops feeling like something you search for and starts revealing itself like a file you finally had permission to open. The divine matrix doesn't reward desire. It rewards coherent command. Watch what happens when someone brings a stable sequence into their financial reality. Most people approach money with a fractured pattern: fear loss, chase opportunity, doubt decision, stall movement. The matrix mirrors the fragmentation, and their financial world becomes unpredictable. But when the command shifts to something grounded, observe data, choose direction, act cleanly, the entire flow reorganizes. They start seeing openings where they used to see threats. Conversations shift, opportunities multiply, not because they manifested abundance, but because their internal architecture finally stopped sending contradictory instructions. This same mechanic shows up even more intensely in relationships. Humans aren't responding only to words or behavior. They're responding to the sequence beneath your presence. When your code is unstable, others feel it as mixed signals. When your code is coherent, others feel it as certainty. I've watched people transform dynamics that had been stuck for years simply by stabilizing their internal pattern before entering a conversation. The moment they walked in, the entire room recalibrated around their clarity. Let me give you a scenario that shows how this works in real time. Imagine you're about to step into a meeting that determines whether a project you've worked on for months moves forward. In the past, your sequence would have splintered. Anticipate judgment, prepare defense, over-explain, self-edit. The matrix mirrored hesitation, and the meeting derailed. But today, your architecture is different. Before entering, you align your system with one clean code. State clearly, hold center, respond precisely. You walk in, and the environment adjusts. The conversation flows. Resistance drops. Decisions move, not because the people changed, because the signal you broadcast reorganized the field. Purpose, too, becomes unmistakable. When your internal code stabilizes, you stop mistaking confusion for destiny. You begin hearing the one direction that was always there beneath the noise. Energetic sovereignty isn't dominance. It's non-interference. It's the state he uncovered that made them try to silence him. A human whose internal code can no longer be overwritten, diluted, or rerouted by external patterns. When you reach this phase, you don't become hard or closed. You become transparent to distortion. Other people's fear, urgency, doubt, or projection pass through you without hooking into your system because there's no loose line for them to attach to. Your architecture is sealed, not armored. Sovereignty begins the moment you stop negotiating with your own signal. As long as you debate your intuition, or second-guess your clarity, or wait for permission, the matrix reads your uncertainty as part of the command. But when your internal pattern becomes consistent, not perfect, consistent, the field recognizes your signal as primary. You stop being someone who reacts to the strongest external presence and become someone whose presence subtly restructures the environment around you. The wild part is that sovereignty doesn't feel powerful at first. It feels quiet. You notice you don't seek validation automatically. You don't amplify other people's chaos. You don't get pulled into loops that used to hijack you instantly. A message that once would have triggered panic now lands with no emotional spike. A confrontation that once would have collapsed your sequence now feels like data, something you read, not something you absorb. That neutrality isn't numbness, it's precision. It's the moment your system stops leaking voltage into patterns that aren't yours. One of the clearest signs of sovereignty is how you handle influence. You can listen deeply without merging. You can empathize without absorbing. You can observe tension without becoming the tension. And because your code no longer wavers, People respond to you differently. Some feel safer around you. Some feel exposed. Some feel challenged without knowing why. It's not personal. Your coherence destabilizes every false pattern around it. Sovereignty also means you're no longer hackable through flattery, fear, urgency, or guilt. Those tactics rely on slipping foreign instructions into your sequence. But when your architecture is intact, every incoming pattern hits a filter. Does this belong to me? Does this match my code? If not, it dissolves on contact. This is the state every ancient lineage hinted at but never openly named. A human whose command sequence cannot be rewritten by anything outside of themselves. In the end, everything he exposed comes down to one truth. Your mind was never a passive observer inside the divine matrix. It was the core processor writing the code beneath your reality. And once you realize that, you stop trying to force life to change and start adjusting the architecture that shapes it. The transformation isn't dramatic. It's clean, quiet, precise. One day you simply feel the click, the moment your inner sequence aligns and the world responds like a system recognizing its original programmer. Picture this, your entire field operating like a luminous grid of circuitry. Each thought a pulse, each emotion a surge of voltage, each breath a stabilizing rhythm. Patterns you once fought now dissolve before they form. Foreign signals pass through you without imprinting. Your presence bends the environment into coherence, not because you're trying, but because your code is finally transmitting without distortion. This is what sovereignty feels like. Not force, but unmistakable clarity. And if you look closely, you'll notice something else. The matrix isn't above you, outside you, or controlling you. It's listening, responding, mirroring the structure you choose with every internal command. The ancient code was never hidden. It was embedded in your design. Now the circuitry is awake. Now the programmer has returned. What moment in your life made you realize your thoughts were influencing reality long before you spoke or acted?